My name is Macy, and at 34 years old, I never imagined I would hear those words from my own mother. The upscale restaurant fell silent as she raised her crystal glass on her 58th birthday, her eyes locked with mine across the elegantly set table. The best birthday gift I could give her, she announced to our stunned family and friends, would be if I simply left her life. Instead of walking away, I made her leave mine. If you are watching this, drop a comment telling me where you are viewing from. Hit that like button and subscribe to follow my journey of reclaiming my life after decades of emotional abuse. Let me tell you more about myself and how things came to such a breaking point with my mother. I work as a successful freelance graphic designer, creating branding packages for small businesses and startups. I love my work because it gives me creative freedom and the ability to help others build their dreams. I have always been drawn to art and visual communication, something my mother, Laura, never understood or valued. Laura is 58 years old and works as a senior bank officer at one of the largest financial institutions in Boston. She has always been meticulous, demanding, and obsessed with appearances. Growing up, our house needed to be spotless whenever anyone visited. My clothes had to be perfectly pressed, and I was expected to achieve straight, as in every subject. Nothing less than perfection was acceptable in her eyes. My father died when I was 12 years old. He was a kind, gentle man who balanced my mother's rigid personality. He worked as an architect and always encouraged my artistic talents. When he passed away suddenly from a heart attack, he left us our family home in the suburbs of Boston and a considerable sum of money from his life insurance and savings. That should have provided financial security, but instead it became another tool of control for my mother. After Dad died, Mom became even more controlling. It was as if losing him made her grip tighter onto everything and everyone else in her life, especially me. I became the sole focus of her perfectionism and criticism. I still remember how she controlled every aspect of my teenage years. I could not attend sleepovers without extensive questioning. My homework was checked twice, once by me and once by her. My clothes were selected based on what she thought looked appropriate, not what I wanted to wear. Our family home sits on a quiet street in Brooklyn, a suburb just outside Boston proper. It is a beautiful colonial-style house with 4 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen that my father renovated himself, and a backyard with a maple tree my parents planted when they first moved in. The house holds so many memories, both good and painful. Every corner contains echoes of my childhood, my father's laughter, and my mother's constant criticism. Throughout my life, Laura consistently compared me to other children she deemed more successful or accomplished. The daughter of her colleague, who became a surgeon, the son of our neighbors who got into Harvard, the niece who married a wealthy businessman at 25. I was never quite good enough in comparison. My artistic talents were dismissed as a hobby, not a real career path. My sensitivity was labeled as weakness, not emotional intelligence. Her expectations were often impossible to meet if I got straight, as she would ask why I did not have more extracurricular activities. If I joined clubs, she would question why my grades were not higher. When I got accepted to Boston University with a partial scholarship for graphic design, she complained that I should have applied to more prestigious schools. The achievement I felt proud of was diminished by her dissatisfaction. After college, I made the decision to move back home temporarily to save money while establishing my freelance business. What I thought would be a 1-year arrangement stretched into nearly 7 years as Laura found ways to make me feel both obligated to stay and guilty for wanting to leave. She would mention how lonely she was, how the house was too big for just her, how she worried about her health. Then in the same conversation, she would criticize my career choice, my appearance, or my lack of a serious relationship. The financial situation between us became increasingly complicated. The money my father left was placed in a joint account that Laura controlled. While technically I had access, any withdrawal I made was scrutinized and questioned. She would ask for detailed explanations of how I planned to spend even small amounts of my inheritance. Meanwhile, she freely used the funds for home renovations, luxury vacations, and expensive clothing, all while criticizing my business expenses as frivolous. Over the years, Laura violated my trust in countless ways. When I was 16, she read my diary and then punished me for the normal teenage thoughts and feelings I had expressed in what I believed was a private space. In college, she would call my roommates to check on my whereabouts if I did not answer my phone quickly enough. Even as an adult living under her roof, she would go through my mail, check my browser history on the family computer, and listen to my phone conversations. My relationship suffered because of her interference. Any friend she disapproved of was subjected to cold treatment when they visited. Any potential romantic partner was scrutinized and found lacking. She would make cutting remarks about their education, career prospects, or family background, often within their hearing. Several promising relationships ended because of her behavior with one boyfriend, telling me he simply could not deal with the stress of navigating my relationship with my mother. Through it all, I kept trying to earn her approval to be good enough in her eyes. I achieved success in my career despite her predictions of failure. I maintained friendships despite her interference. I built a life for myself while living under the shadow of her judgment. But the constant criticism wore me down year after year, eroding my self-confidence and making me question my own perceptions and decisions until that birthday dinner, when everything finally became crystal clear. I spent weeks planning the perfect celebration for my mother's 58th birthday. I wanted everything to be special, partly because I genuinely hoped to please her, and partly because I still held on to the childish fantasy that if I did everything right, she might finally approve of me. I reserved a private dining room at Sorellina, one of the most exclusive Italian restaurants in Boston and her favorite place for special occasions. I personally selected the menu, ensuring all her favorite dishes would be served. Prosciutto with figs and aged balsamic for the appetizer. Wild mushroom risotto as the first course. Ossobuco with saffron risotto for the main dish. I had spent hours on the phone with the pastry chef, designing a custom birthday cake. A delicate hazelnut torte with gold leaf decoration that cost over $200. No detail was overlooked. For her gift, I had saved for months to purchase a diamond tennis bracelet from Tiffany. It cost nearly $6,000 money I had set aside for a down payment on my own apartment, but I convinced myself the sacrifice was worth it if it could somehow bridge the gap between us. I had it wrapped in the signature Tiffany blue box with a handwritten card expressing how much she meant to me. I invited 15 of her closest friends and family members. Her sister Susan flew in from Chicago. Her best friend Diane came despite recovering from knee surgery. Her colleagues from the bank attended along with neighbors she had known for decades. Everyone who mattered to her was there, which made what happened even more devastating. The evening began beautifully. The restaurant staff was attentive. The food was exquisite, and Laura seemed genuinely happy. She smiled more than I had seen in years, laughing at stories her friends shared and accepting compliments graciously. For a few hopeful hours, I allowed myself to believe that this birthday might mark a turning point in our relationship, that the warmth she showed to her friends might finally extend to me as well. When it came time for toasts, each guest stood and shared a memory or kind word about Laura. Her boss praised her work ethic and attention to detail. Her sister reminisced about their childhood adventures. Her friend Diane thanked her for her support during difficult times. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory, filled with genuine affection. Then it was Laura's turn to speak. She stood elegant in the navy blue dress I had helped her select, diamond earrings glinting in the soft lighting of the restaurant. She thanked everyone for coming, expressing appreciation for their friendship and support. She mentioned how blessed she felt to have such wonderful people in her life. Then she paused, swirled the wine in her glass, and looked directly at me. "You know what would be the best birthday gift?" she said, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet room. "If Macy would finally leave my life." The silence that followed was absolute. Forks froze midway to mouths. Glasses stopped clinking. It was as if someone had pressed pause on the entire evening. I felt blood rush to my face as 15 pairs of eyes darted between my mother and me. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. Laura continued, seemingly oblivious to the shock she had created. For 34 years, I have watched her make one disappointing choice after another. Her mediocre career as a so-called designer, her inability to find a suitable husband or give me grandchildren, the way she continues to depend on me financially and emotionally instead of standing on her own 2 feet like a real adult. Each word felt like a physical blow. I could not breathe. I could not move. I could only sit there pinned by her gaze and her words as she systematically dismantled my entire existence in front of everyone I knew. One of her friends, Patricia, attempted to laugh it off. "Oh, Laura, you do not mean that. You're just joking around after too much wine." My mother took a deliberate sip from her glass and replied, "I have never been more serious in my life. Sometimes the truth needs to be spoken. I have carried this burden long enough." The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, avoiding eye contact with both of us. The server, who had approached with coffee, quickly retreated. The beautiful cake sat forgotten on its silver stand. I felt simultaneous waves of humiliation, rage, and crushing sadness. My throat closed up, making it impossible to defend myself or respond in any way. Tears threatened, but I refused to cry in front of these people. Refused to give my mother the satisfaction of seeing me break. The evening disintegrated after that. Guests made awkward excuses to leave early. The restaurant staff hurried to package uneaten cake and bring coats. No one knew what to say to me, though. A few squeezed my hand or patted my shoulder sympathetically as they left. Within 30 minutes, the private dining room that had been filled with celebration was nearly empty. The drive home was conducted in complete silence. Laura sat in the passenger seat, occasionally checking her phone as if nothing unusual had happened. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, focusing all my energy on making it home without breaking down. When we arrived, she went straight to her room without another word, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the remains of her birthday cake and the weight of her public rejection crushing my chest. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, my mother's words playing on an endless loop in my mind. As painful as her birthday declaration had been, it was just the culmination of a lifetime of similar moments, each one a brick in the wall she had built between us. I remembered my college graduation day. I had graduated magna cum laude with a degree in graphic design, landing a prestigious internship before many of my classmates had even started job hunting. As families gathered on the lawn for photos, other parents were hugging their children, expressing pride and excitement for their futures. When I found my mother in the crowd, her first words were, "That useless art degree is going to leave you unemployed and living in my house forever." She did not even want a photograph together. 3 years ago, I landed my biggest client, yet a tech startup that hired me to create their entire brand identity. The project doubled my annual income and was featured in a design magazine. When I showed my mother the article, hoping finally for some acknowledgement of my success, she glanced at it briefly and said, "Lucky timing. They probably could not afford a real agency." Then she changed the subject to her friend's daughter, who had just made partner at a law firm. Then there was Jason, the architectural engineer I dated for nearly 2 years. He was kind, intelligent, and treated me with respect and affection. I thought he might be the one until the night he came to dinner at our house. Laura spent the entire evening subtly undermining him, questioning his career prospects, making thinly veiled comments about his modest background. When he went to the bathroom, she hissed at me that I could do better, that he was clearly not good enough for her daughter. 2 weeks later, Jason ended things, saying he could not see a future with someone whose family would never accept him. About 2 years before the birthday incident, I had finally sought professional help. My therapist, Dr. Lawson, helped me recognize the patterns of emotional abuse and control that had characterized my relationship with my mother throughout my life. He explained concepts like gaslighting, where Laura would deny saying hurtful things I clearly remembered, and emotional blackmail, where she would withdraw affection or threaten abandonment if I did not comply with her wishes. The sessions were painful but illuminating, helping me understand that the problem was not my inadequacy, but her toxic behavior. The morning after her birthday, I came downstairs to find Laura having breakfast, as if nothing unusual had happened. She was dressed for work, reading the newspaper and eating her usual yogurt with granola. I stood in the doorway, waiting for some acknowledgement of the previous night's events, some explanation or apology. "Is there coffee made?" she asked without looking up from her paper. "Are we not going to talk about what you said last night?" I asked, my voice shakier than I intended. She flipped a page. "I do not know what you are talking about. If you have not made coffee, please do so. I need to leave for work in 20 minutes. It was such a classic example of her gaslighting that it almost made me laugh. Almost. Instead, I turned and left the house without another word, driving aimlessly until I found myself parked outside my friend Nicole's apartment building. Nicole and I had been friends since college. She had witnessed Laura's behavior firsthand over the years and had always provided a safe haven when things at home became unbearable. She was also a family law attorney, which proved invaluable in the weeks that followed. Over strong coffee at her kitchen table, I poured out the entire story of the birthday dinner. Nicole listened without interrupting her expression, growing increasingly concerned. "This is beyond toxic, Macy," she said when I finished. "It is emotional abuse, plain and simple, and it is time for you to get out." "I know," I admitted. "I have known for a long time, but the house your father left to both of you," Nicole reminded me. "The house that, according to the documents you showed me last year, becomes solely yours if either of you chooses to leave permanently. Your father made sure you would always have a home, Macy." She was right. My father had been wise enough to include that provision in his will, perhaps sensing that the relationship between my mother and me might deteriorate after his death. I had never seriously considered enforcing it, always hoping things would improve naturally. That hope had died at Sorelina last night. Nicole helped me log into my banking app where we discovered something alarming. Laura had transferred $15,000 from our joint account to her personal account that morning. It was not the first time she had moved money without telling me, but it was the largest amount yet. "She is preparing for something," Nicole said grimly. "This is not random timing." As we talked further, a plan began to take shape. Laura had explicitly stated she wanted me out of her life, but legally, financially, and morally, I was not the one who should leave. The house was partly mine by inheritance. My business was established in Boston. My few close friendships were nearby. "You do not have to be the one who leaves," Nicole said, echoing my thoughts. "She said she wants you gone. Fine. But that does not mean you have to go anywhere." Maybe it is time she experienced the consequences of her words. With Nicole's help, I began to see that I had options. I did not have to continue accepting Laura's abuse. I did not have to keep hoping for approval that would never come. I could stand up for myself, enforce boundaries, and reclaim the life and home that were rightfully mine. By the time I left Nicole's apartment that afternoon, I had made my decision. My mother had asked for a gift at her birthday, the gift of me leaving her life. Instead, I would give her something else entirely. I would give her exactly what she had given me for 34 years, the experience of having everything she valued controlled by someone else. Over the next 3 days, I gathered every legal document related to our house and my father's estate. The original deed, the updated will, insurance policies, tax records, utility bills. Nicole had advised me to have everything in order before taking any action, and I was determined to be thorough. I hired James Peterson, a private investigator recommended by Nicole, to look into our financial situation. I needed to know exactly what assets we shared, what belonged solely to me, and what Laura might have hidden over the years. James was discreet, efficient, and uncovered more than I had anticipated. Within a week, he provided documentation showing that Laura had withdrawn over $100,000 from our joint account over the past 3 years. Money that was partly my inheritance from my father, taken without my knowledge or consent. She had used it to invest in stocks, take luxury vacations she claimed were work-related, and renovate parts of the house without consulting me. Armed with this information, I went to our bank and froze the joint account. With Nicole present as my legal representative, I explained the situation to the bank manager, showing proof of the unauthorized withdrawals and my partial ownership of the funds. The manager was sympathetic, particularly when Nicole pointed out the potential legal consequences for the bank if they allowed continued unauthorized access to inherited funds. I then opened a new account in my name only and transferred my freelance business earnings into it. For the first time in my adult life, I had financial resources that were completely under my control. The sense of freedom was both exhilarating and terrifying. Laura's reaction was swift and furious. She called my cell phone 17 times in a row when she discovered she could not access the joint account. I let the calls go to voicemail, listening later to her progressively angrier messages. "What do you think you were doing?" she demanded in the first message. By the 10th, she was threatening legal action. By the 15th, her voice had taken on a wounded tone, asking how I could do this to my own mother. The manipulation was so transparent now that I could identify it, but it still twisted something in my chest to hear it. I waited until I knew Laura would be at work the following day. Then I called a locksmith and had every lock in the house changed. The locksmith was initially hesitant when I explained the situation, but the deed showing my name and the documented history of financial abuse were enough to convince him to proceed. While he worked, I hired a security company to install cameras covering the exterior of the house. If Laura attempted to force her way in or damage property, I wanted it documented. The security technician helped me set up alerts that would send notifications to my phone if anyone approached the house. Nicole came over that evening to help me prepare for the inevitable confrontation. We went through possible scenarios, practiced what I would say, and reviewed the legal documents one more time. She reminded me that I had every right to protect myself and my property, that Laura's emotional abuse did not entitle her to continue exploiting me financially or living in a house that was partially mine. "Remember," Nicole said before she left, "you are not doing anything wrong. You are not being cruel. You are establishing healthy boundaries with someone who has consistently violated them. This is not revenge, it is protection." At 6:15 that evening, I heard a car in the driveway. Through the newly installed security camera, I watched Laura approach the front door, shopping bags in hand, clearly unaware of what awaited her. My heart raced as she put her key in the lock, then tried again when it did not work. I took a deep breath and moved to the window. She saw me then, her expression shifting from confusion to anger as understanding dawned. She began pounding on the door, her voice carrying clearly through the wood. "Macy, open this door immediately. What have you done to the locks?" I spoke through the door, keeping my voice calm and steady as Nicole and I had practiced. "The locks have been changed, Mom. Your key will not work anymore. This is my house," she shouted, her face wreathing. "You cannot lock me out of my own house. I am calling the police." "This is legally my house too," I replied. "And I have documentation of financial abuse that gives me the right to secure it. You can call the police if you want to. In fact, I already have." That was true. Nicole had suggested I contact the police department preemptively, explaining the situation and asking them to note in their system that there might be a call from my address. I had spoken with a sympathetic officer who understood domestic disputes and assured me they would respond appropriately if called. Laura did call the police just as I expected. When 2 officers arrived 20 minutes later, she launched into a performance of maternal distress, complete with tears and trembling hands. She told them her ungrateful daughter had locked her out of her own home, that I was mentally unstable, that she feared for her safety. I invited the officers inside and calmly presented my documentation: the deed showing joint ownership, the bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals, the provision in my father's will regarding sole ownership if one party chose to leave. I played the recording of Laura's birthday speech, where she clearly stated she wanted me out of her life. The officers exchanged glances as they listened. "Ma'am," one officer finally said to Laura, "this appears to be a civil matter, not a criminal one. Based on the documentation we have seen, Miss Spencer has legal right to be in this property. We cannot force her to allow you entry." "But my clothes, my personal belongings," Laura protested. "I am willing to let you collect essential personal items," I said, with the officers present as witnesses. The look Laura gave me contained more hatred than I had ever seen directed at anyone, let alone from a mother to her daughter, but with the police watching, she had no choice but to agree to my terms. I stood silently as she filled 2 suitcases with clothing, toiletries, and personal documents from her bedroom. The officers remained present the entire time, ensuring the process remained peaceful despite the palpable tension. When Laura reached for a small jewelry box containing pieces that had belonged to my grandmother, I quietly pointed out that those were family heirlooms that belonged to both of us. After a moment of tense silence, she withdrew her hand. As she prepared to leave, Laura suddenly shifted tactics. The anger drained from her face, replaced by an expression of wounded vulnerability I had seen many times before. Her eyes filled with tears as she turned to me. "How can you do this to me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "After everything I have sacrificed for you, I gave you everything, Macy. Everything. In the past, This performance would have worked. I would have crumbled under the weight of guilt, apologized, and given in to whatever she wanted. But now I remembered her words at the restaurant, spoken clearly and deliberately in front of witnesses. The best birthday gift would be if I left her life. "I am giving you what you asked for," I said quietly. "You wanted me out of your life. Instead, I am removing you from mine. You can contact me through Nicole from now on. She will be handling all communication as my attorney." The officers escorted Laura to her car. Through the window, I watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing down the street. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly alone in my own home. The silence felt like both a blessing and a challenge. What would I do with this newfound freedom? Who would I become without the constant weight of her disapproval? I did not know yet, but I was finally free to find out. Laura checked into the Marriott downtown, a fact I learned from her sister Susan, who called the next day to berate me for throwing my mother onto the street. I listened calmly to Susan's accusations, then explained exactly what had happened at the birthday dinner and in the years leading up to it. Susan's tone changed somewhat when I played the recording of Laura's speech, but family loyalty ran deep. She ended the call by saying she hoped I would come to my senses soon. Within days, I discovered that Laura had launched a systematic campaign to damage my reputation and pressure me into backing down. She contacted extended family members, mutual friends, and even some of my clients with stories about my mental breakdown and how I had cruelly evicted her. According to her narrative, I had become unstable, possibly due to drug use or a personality disorder, and had fabricated accusations against her to steal her home. Several relatives called to express concern about my mental health. My cousin Thomas, who I had always been close to, asked if I needed to talk to someone professional. My uncle Robert suggested I was having a midlife crisis at 34. Each conversation required patient explanation and in some cases sharing evidence of Laura's behavior that I would have preferred to keep private. The situation worsened when Laura began contacting my clients. As a freelancer, my reputation was everything. When she reached out to the marketing director at Horizon Tech, one of my largest accounts, suggesting that my personal problems might affect my work reliability, they put our upcoming project on hold, pending resolution of personal issues. It was a significant financial blow at a time when I was already dealing with legal and emotional stress. 3 more clients distanced themselves after receiving similar calls or emails. One specifically mentioned not wanting to get involved in family drama. My carefully built business was suffering, and with it, my financial stability. There were moments when the pressure felt so intense that I considered giving in, allowing Laura back into the house and my life just to make the nightmare stop. During one particularly low moment, I found myself searching online for support groups related to family estrangement and emotional abuse. That was how I found the forum Healing from Toxic Parents, and through it, Olivia. She had experienced a similar situation with her mother 3 years earlier and understood exactly what I was going through. Our first video chat lasted 4 hours with Olivia listening, validating my experiences and offering practical advice based on her own journey. "The smear campaign is textbook," she told me. "My mother did the same thing. She contacted my boss, my friends, even my dentist. It feels like your whole world is collapsing, but I promise you it does get better. The people who matter will see through it eventually." Olivia recommended Dr. Margaret Winters, a psychologist specializing in family trauma and emotional abuse. Dr. Winters offered virtual sessions, which fit my unpredictable schedule and increasingly tight budget. From our first meeting, I felt understood in a way I never had before. She helped me recognize the patterns of abuse I had normalized throughout my life and develop strategies for maintaining boundaries despite the escalating pressure. "What you are experiencing now is an extinction burst," Dr. Winters explained during one session. When a person loses control over someone they have manipulated for years, they often escalate their behavior dramatically before giving up. Your mother is pulling out all the stops because she senses she is losing her power over you. Meanwhile, Laura had hired Frank Wilson, an aggressive family attorney known for his confrontational approach. Nicole received a lengthy letter outlining Laura's intention to sue me for wrongful eviction, emotional distress, and financial damages. The letter painted Laura as a devoted mother, blindsided by her daughter's irrational behavior, and demanded her immediate return to the family home. Nicole assured me the claims were legally dubious, but responding to them would still require time and money. We filed a detailed response with evidence of Laura's financial misappropriation and emotional abuse. The legal back and forth added another layer of stress to an already difficult situation. Then James Peterson, the private investigator, made a significant discovery. Laura had a secret bank account containing over $250,000. Based on the transfer dates, much of it appeared to be money she had gradually moved from our joint account over the past decade. It was substantially more than the $100,000 we had initially discovered, and it provided concrete evidence of long-term financial deception. This changes things, Nicole said, when we reviewed the findings. This is not just a few questionable withdrawals. This is systematic theft of your inheritance. We have grounds for a serious counterclaim. Just as we were preparing to use this new information, Laura escalated again. She showed up at the office space I rented for client meetings, creating a scene in the lobby. She loudly demanded to speak with me, claiming to passing clients that I had stolen her money and home. When the building security asked her to leave, she refused, resulting in them having to physically escort her from the premises. A client who witnessed the incident later called to terminate our contract, citing concerns about professionalism and stability. The financial and reputational damage was mounting, and Laura showed no signs of backing down. That evening, after consulting with Nicole and Dr. Winters, I filed for a temporary restraining order against my mother. The documentation was extensive financial records. The recording from the birthday dinner statements, from witnesses to the office incident, and a professional assessment from Dr. Winters regarding the pattern of emotional abuse. The judge granted the order prohibiting Laura from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. When Laura was served with the restraining order, she called me despite the clear prohibition against contact. I did not answer but saved the voicemail where she swung between rage and tearful pleas. "You will regret this," she said at one point. "No one treats me this way and gets away with it. I made you and I can destroy you just as easily." Dr. Winters helped me see the voicemail for what it was, final confirmation that I had made the right decision. Those are not the words of a loving mother concerned about her daughter's well-being. She pointed out, those are the words of someone who views you as a possession, not a person. As difficult as this period was, it was also clarifying. Each escalation by Laura stripped away another layer of doubt, another whisper of guilt. The mother I had spent my life trying to please, whose approval I had desperately sought, did not exist. The real Laura was someone who would rather destroy me than see me establish independence. Understanding that truth was painful, but it was also the first step toward genuine freedom. The court date for our hearing was set for 3 weeks after the temporary restraining order was granted. During that time, I focused on rebuilding what Laura had tried to destroy. I reached out personally to clients who had received her calls, explaining the situation as briefly and professionally as possible. Some were understanding, others remained hesitant. I took on smaller projects to maintain cash flow and worked longer hours to prove my reliability. Nicole helped me prepare extensively for the hearing. We organized all documentation chronologically, practiced my testimony, and discussed potential questions from Laura's attorney. She brought in a colleague with expertise in financial abuse cases to strengthen our approach. The goal was not just to maintain the restraining order, but to legally establish my right to the house and seek restitution for the misappropriated funds. On the morning of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse an hour early, dressed in a conservative navy suit with minimal jewelry. Nicole had advised me to project calm professionalism regardless of what tactics Laura and her attorney might employ. Inside, I was a mess of nerves, but I was determined to present a composed exterior. When Laura entered with Frank Wilson, I barely recognized her. Gone was the immaculately dressed, confident bank executive. In her place was a frail-looking woman in a modest gray dress, minimal makeup, and her hair pulled back simply. She walked slowly, leaning slightly on Wilson's arm as if for support. It was a masterful performance of vulnerability, designed to contrast sharply with the aggressive daughter narrative they were presenting. Judge Moore, a woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes and a reputation for cutting through emotional manipulation, presided over our case. She reviewed the filed documents carefully before inviting Wilson to present Laura's side first. Wilson painted a heart-wrenching picture of a devoted mother blindsided by her daughter's inexplicable betrayal. According to his narrative, Laura had sacrificed everything for me, supporting my artistic whims despite financial strain, and maintaining a home for me well into my 30s. The birthday comment was described as a misunderstood joke, taken out of context, and weaponized against a loving parent. Your Honor, Wilson concluded, what we have here is a clear case of elder abuse. Miss Spencer has forcibly removed her 58-year-old mother from her own home, cut off access to joint funds that Laura Spencer primarily contributed to, and manufactured allegations of abuse to justify this unconscionable behavior. We ask the court to immediately restore Mrs. Spencer to her home and access to her financial resources. When it was Nicole's turn, she methodically dismantled this narrative. She presented the deed showing my father's intention for joint ownership with provisions for sole ownership if either party chose to leave. She played the unedited recording of the birthday speech, which clearly showed Laura's statement was no joke. The bank records revealed a pattern of Laura systematically diverting funds from our joint account to her secret personal account over many years. Olivia testified about the similarities between Laura's behavior and her own mother's, explaining the common patterns of narcissistic abuse. Two former friends of mine described witnessing Laura's controlling behavior and belittling comments throughout my life. James Peterson presented his findings about the hidden account and the misappropriated funds. Dr. Margaret Winters provided expert testimony about the psychological impact of long-term emotional abuse and financial control. She explained how Laura's behaviors aligned with recognized patterns of parental narcissistic abuse, and how the public humiliation at the birthday dinner represented a typical escalation when the abuser senses the victim establishing independence. Throughout these testimonies, I watched Laura's expression shift between affected hurt and barely contained rage. Wilson whispered to her frequently, apparently trying to keep her calm as the evidence mounted against her version of events. When I finally took the stand, I spoke directly and honestly about my experiences. I described growing up under constant criticism, never feeling good enough despite my achievements. I explained how Laura had controlled our joint finances, restricted my independence, and systematically undermined my self-confidence. I shared specific incidents, dates, and witnesses. Throughout my testimony, I maintained eye contact with Judge Moore. Speaking with the clarity that comes from finally acknowledging painful truths, Laura's composure finally broke when cross-examining me. Despite Wilson's attempt to maintain control of the questioning, she interrupted repeatedly. You were always difficult, she snapped at one point. Always so sensitive, taking everything personally. Nothing was ever good enough for you, Mrs. Spencer, Judge Moore warned. Please allow your attorney to conduct the cross-examination. But Laura continued, her voice rising. I gave you everything, a home and education support for your little drawing business. And this is how you repay me, by humiliating me in court with these lies. They are not lies, I said quietly. They are the truth. I have been afraid to speak for 34 years. You have always been a failure, Laura hissed, ignoring Wilson's attempt to silence her. Just like your father, weak, pathetic. I did my best with what I had to work with. Her outburst accomplished what hours of testimony might not have. Judge Moore's expression hardened as she witnessed firsthand the contempt Laura barely concealed beneath her victim facade. After a brief recess during which Wilson could be seen desperately trying to calm his client, the judge delivered her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I am granting a permanent restraining order prohibiting Laura Spencer from contacting Macy Spencer or coming within 500 FT of her home or place of business for a period of 1 year, after which the order may be reviewed. Additionally, I find that the property at 42 Maple Street legally belongs to Macy Spencer in accordance with the provisions in Harold Spencer's will. Judge Moore continued addressing the financial matters regarding the funds withdrawn from the joint account. Laura Spencer is ordered to return $175,000, representing Macy Spencer's portion of the misappropriated inheritance within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in additional legal action and potential penalties. Laura's face drained of color as the judge spoke. When Wilson informed her they would appeal, Judge Moore added, You are certainly entitled to appeal, Mr. Wilson. However, I suggest you advise your client that any further attempts to contact Ms. Spencer directly to disparage her to clients or associates or to violate the terms of this restraining order will be viewed as contempt of court and dealt with accordingly. As we left the courtroom, Laura caught up to us in the hallway, ignoring the restraining order that had been issued minutes earlier. Wilson tried to pull her back, but she shook off his hand. "This is not over," she said, her voice low and intense. "You think you have won, but you have no idea what you have done. You will regret this, Macy. When you are alone with no family, no support, you will remember this day and wish you had never started this." I looked at my mother, really looked at her perhaps for the first time. I saw the anger, the need for control, the inability to see me as a separate person, deserving of respect and autonomy. And I felt something unexpected pity. I already know what it is like to be without family support. I told her, "I have lived that way my entire life, even while living under your roof. The difference now is that I will be alone by choice, not because I am being told I am unworthy of love." I turned to leave but added one final thought. "You asked for a birthday gift, Mom. You said the best gift would be if I left your life. Consider this, me finally giving you exactly what you asked for." As Nicole led me away, I heard Wilson urging Laura to calm down, warning her about violating the restraining order on the courthouse steps. I did not look back. For the first time in my life, I was walking towards something, not away from someone. The distinction made all the difference. 18 months have passed since that day in court. The house on Maple Street still stands, but it has transformed along with me. I painted the walls colors my father would have loved and my mother would have hated. A warm terracotta in the living room, peaceful sage in the kitchen, and a bold teal in what was once Laura's bedroom, but is now my home office. Each brushstroke felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, painting over the memories of criticism and control with colors that brought me joy. My graphic design business survived the crisis and has even thrived. After the initial loss of clients due to Laura's interference, word of mouth from those who stayed loyal helped me rebuild. I have expanded my services to include brand strategy consulting, which has attracted larger clients and more stable contracts. 6 months ago, I hired my first employee, a talented recent graduate who reminds me of myself at that age, except she has the mentor I never had. The therapy sessions with Dr. Winters continued weekly for the first year, then gradually decreased as I developed stronger coping mechanisms and clearer boundaries. We worked through the complex grief of losing a parent who is still alive but toxic, the guilt that occasionally resurfaces. Despite all evidence that I made the right choice and the fear of somehow becoming like my mother in my own relationships, healing is not linear. Dr. Winters would remind me whenever I felt frustrated by setbacks. Some days will be harder than others. The goal is not to never feel pain about this loss, but to understand that the pain does not mean you made the wrong choice. Through therapy, I came to understand how my childhood shaped my adult patterns. I recognized my tendency to seek approval from authority figures, to apologize excessively, to doubt my perceptions when challenged. Naming these patterns was the first step toward changing them. Slowly, I learned to trust my own judgment, to express my needs clearly, and to set healthy boundaries in all relationships. 8 months after the court hearing, I met Daniel at a charity event for arts education. He is an architect like my father, with a quiet confidence and genuine interest in others that immediately set him apart. Our relationship developed slowly, with deliberate conversations about expectations, communication styles, and past experiences. When I finally shared the full story about Laura, he listened without judgment and asked thoughtful questions about how the experience had affected me. My father was controlling too, he told me. Not in the same way as your mother, but enough that I understand the hypervigilance, always watching for signs of disapproval. We are both works in progress, but I think we can progress together if you are willing. We have been dating for 10 months now. Daniel respects my independence while offering support when needed. He understands when certain interactions trigger old insecurities and helps me distinguish between present reality and past conditioning. For the first time, I am experiencing what a healthy relationship feels like, built on mutual respect rather than power dynamics. Beyond romantic relationships, I have built what therapists call a chosen family. Olivia and I remain close friends, meeting weekly for coffee and check-ins. Nicole is no longer just my attorney, but a trusted friend who joins us for monthly dinner parties. My neighbor Elijah, a retired English professor, has become a father figure who shares book recommendations and gardening advice. Together with Daniel and a few other close friends, they form the supportive community I always needed but never had growing up. As for Laura, I have maintained the boundary of no contact. She did appeal the court's decision as threatened, but the appeal was denied based on the substantial evidence presented in the original hearing. According to Susan, who occasionally sends brief updates, Laura moved to Florida 6 months ago to live near her sister. She still maintains that she was the victim in our story, never acknowledging her role in the breakdown of our relationship. Laura occasionally sends emails despite the restraining order. Some are angry, blaming me for her need to relocate and the damage to her reputation. Others attempt manipulation through guilt detailing health problems or financial difficulties. Early on, these messages would throw me into emotional turmoil for days. Now I forward them to my attorney without reading beyond the subject line and continue with my day unaffected. The most profound lesson I have learned through this painful journey is about the nature of love itself. True love, whether parental or otherwise, is not about control or molding someone to meet your expectations. It is about seeing another person as they truly are and supporting their autonomy and growth. My mother never loved me in this way. She loved the idea of having a daughter she could shape into a reflection of herself. But she never saw or accepted the actual person I am. I have also learned about the necessity of loving myself enough to walk away from relationships that diminish, rather than enhance my life. For years, I stayed because I believed family obligation trumped personal well-being. I now understand that no relationship, not even one with a parent, justifies ongoing emotional abuse. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to release the hope that toxic people will change and instead focus on building a life filled with genuine connections. The journey of rebuilding after family estrangement is not easy. There are holidays that feel empty or life milestones without the witnesses you once expected to have, and the occasional well-meaning question about family that reopens healing wounds. But there is also freedom to become the person you were meant to be without constant criticism, freedom to create new traditions and relationships based on mutual respect. And for Lee, freedom to define family by love and behavior, rather than merely by blood. If you are watching this and struggling with a toxic family relationship, please know you are not alone. The decision to establish boundaries, whether temporary distance or permanent arrangement, is deeply personal and often misunderstood by others. Only you know the full story of your relationship, and only you can decide what level of contact is healthy for you. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your well-being that others did not understand? Share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes knowing others have walked a similar path can be the validation we need to trust our own journey. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support others finding their way toward healthier relationships and self-acceptance. Thank you for witnessing my story, and may you find the courage to write your own ending, whatever that means for you.